If you want to buy a business with an asking price of $4 million, do you know how much cash that you actually need to bring to the closing table? It's not 4 million, it's not even 2. Today I'm breaking down three numbers because one of the biggest time wasters in selling a business is entertaining a buyer who was never financially qualified to begin with. I see it happen to sellers all the time. They go it alone or they work with a broker who has not screened the buyer properly. They spend weeks sharing their financials, having conversations, getting emotionally invested in the deal, and then it falls apart because the buyer simply didn't have the liquidity to close a multi-million dollar deal. So today, I want to share something most sellers never get to see, what it actually takes for a buyer to purchase a $4 million business. The real numbers, because when you understand what a qualified buyer looks like in this tier, you stop wasting your time on the ones who aren't. After 35 years in business and selling my own company, I can tell you understanding your buyer is just as important as marketing your business. Let's talk about what it actually costs a buyer to purchase your business when we're talking about a $4 million asset. Here's what most sellers assume, that a buyer needs to show up with $4 million in cash in the bank account, or at least half of it. The assumption keeps a lot of sellers from moving forward because they think that qualified buyers are incredibly rare. And it keeps them from recognizing a truly qualified buyer when one is standing right in front of them. The reality is that most businesses at this level are financed specifically through an SBA 7A loan. And that changes the math significantly for the buyer and for you as a seller. When I'm evaluating whether a buyer is genuinely qualified for one of my multi-million dollar listings, I look at what I call the three financial commitments from the buyer. Financial commitment number one: under SBA guidelines, a buyer generally needs to put down a minimum of 10% of the purchase price. So on a $4 million business, that's $400,000 in cash. The bank structures a 10-year loan for $3.6 million approximately. That surprises a lot of people. Most don't realize that you can leverage 90% of a major business acquisition. Now, at $4 million, that 10% can shift depending on the strength of the buyer's resume, the business historical debt service coverage, and specific lender overlay rules. I always confirm this with my lending partners. But 400,000 is the baseline equity injection number to hold in your head. Financial commitment number two: the working capital. This is the money that keeps your business running from the exact second the keys and the accounts transfer to the new owner. Payroll, rent, inventory, utilities. A $4 million service business has a massive, fast-moving rhythm of expenses, and a buyer needs to have enough to honor the rhythm from day one. Now, here's something a lot of people don't realize. Working capital can actually be built directly into the SBA loan structure. The bank provides it as part of the overall financing package rather than requiring it as a separate out-of-pocket cash expense for the buyer. But, and this is critical, a buyer still needs to prove to the lender that they understand exactly what the number needs to be. I actually spoke recently with a previous buyer of mine who closed on one of my businesses about 8 months ago. Smart guy, well prepared. The bank built 800,000 in working capital right into his SBA loan. For the first several months, the slower part of the year for that business, he didn't need to touch it at all. The business was covering itself. He thought he might not even need it. Then the busy season hit, and something he didn't fully anticipate came into play: the accounts receivables cycle. His business was generating massive real revenue. Clients were signing contracts, but there's always a 36-year, even 90-day lag between when the service is done and when the cash actually lands in the bank account. During that gap, with payroll and operating expenses still due on a strict schedule, he ended up dipping into the working capital to bridge it. And here's the thing, he had it because the bank had required it and because he was prepared. The $800,000 wasn't just a number on a spreadsheet. It was what kept a healthy, highly profitable service business running smoothly during a completely normal cash flow cycle. The story matters for you as a seller because it illustrates something critical. Working capital isn't a sign that the business is struggling. It's a sign that the buyer understands how mid-market commerce actually works. Financial commitment number three: the reserve. This is the financial commitment that nobody talks about and the one that separates solid buyers from the shaky ones. The reserve is personal, unencumbered money that the buyer keeps separate, untouched by the bank or the down payment, for the exact moment things don't go exactly as planned. And in any business transition, something always goes sideways in the first 90 days. The down payment gets them in the door, the working capital keeps the lights on, the reserve keeps them standing when the first hard weeks come, because it does come. On a $4 million business, I want to see a buyer with at least 100,000 to 150,000 in personal reserves left after closing. A buyer who empties their entire life savings down to the last penny to make the down payment is fragile. And fragile buyers become difficult, paranoid buyers, the kind who panic during due diligence or try to aggressively renegotiate right before closing. So when you add all three financial commitments together, the down payment, the working capital, and the post-closing liquidity reserve, a genuinely qualified buyer for a 4 million business typically needs to show somewhere in the range of 550,000 to 650,000 in actual liquid capital, plus stellar credit, a clean background, and relevant industry or management experience that makes a commercial lender feel comfortable. That's why buyer screening is so critical, and it's why I take it seriously on every listing that I represent. I want to say one more thing that I think sellers deserve to understand about buyers. When a buyer takes out an SBA loan for a $4 million acquisition, they aren't just signing a corporate document, they are signing a personal guarantee. If the business cannot repay the loan, they're personally liable. The government will place a lien on their primary residence, their personal investments, and their assets. A serious buyer is making a massive life altering personal bet on your business. That's not something to take lightly on either side. The right buyer deserves a business that's been transparently and honestly represented. And you, as the owner, deserve a buyer who has a financial foundation and the grit to see it through. When those two things come together, that's where a clean, successful, confidential deal happens. If you're thinking about selling your business in the Bay Area, California, or select states and want to understand what a qualified buyer actually looks like for your specific company, please contact me. My name is Antoinette Gonzales Norris. Don't forget to hit subscribe. We talk every week about selling businesses, increasing your profit, and setting you up for retirement or your next move.